Welcome to the RFP Success Show with host Lisa Rehurik, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. Each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs and have a little fun doing it. Let's get this week's episode started.
Welcome, everybody, to the RFP Success Show. My name is Lisa Rehurik, and I am your host. I am also founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company. And today we welcome Fergal McGovern, CEO of Visible Thread. And we have already had one heck of a morning. The technology gods were not working in my favor this morning, so Fergal's already been very patient. So Fergal, welcome to the RFP Success Show.
Hey, thanks so much, Lisa. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's just kick it off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and Visible Thread, what it is that you all do.
I hope I don't blow our time slot here. There's a lot in that question. So I suppose my job and my background in terms of Visible Thread was I started the company about 10 years ago or so. We are a software solutions company, and we provide a lot of high-level value-add solutions that help our customers, people like Boeing, Accenture, Lockheed Martin, and so forth, to really make their organization approach to RFPs and contract review much more efficient. And I do my best to help out, basically, and work with a lot of our key accounts and also try and do a good job of driving our company forward and expanding.
That's great. I love that you started this. Like, what made you start the company? Like, was there a need that you saw out there in the world?
Yeah, there was actually. So our mission in the company is to actually make the world a clearer place. And that sounds a bit kind of waffly, but my own background, God love me, I'm about 30 years in this business of kind of doing stuff in corporates. But my original background was IT, and a lot of my experience in IT was fraught with misunderstanding, people just not understanding what people were saying and saying it through the written word, right? Yeah. So the issue here is fundamentally, let's try and almost harmonize. Let's put metrics on things that allow us to quantify and get quality assessments of what's written. So if we think about that in the proposal context, if you're a proposal manager and you're shipping across a proposal to the government or even in the commercial setting, you're dealing with a very hard problem. You've got lots of people contributing, and they're each communicating in their own style, their own vernacular, and their own approach. So we measure and score that content, and we make sure that it's got a single tone of voice and that there isn't accidental risk and risk of misinterpretation as well as compliance type risk in that content. So it's really about looking at the written word. It's about making things much more efficient for our customers.
Wow. So that's really interesting. And I'm going to ask you a question that is a totally loaded question, but I'm guessing that you get it all the time. But how does it actually figure that out?
So if we actually divide, there's a number of different dimensions that we will score content on. But let's take a very simple thing. So most people listening to this show will, of course, be very familiar with the dreaded compliance matrix. And a compliance matrix is a critical tool in anybody's arsenal that allows them to control the delivery cycles and make sure that they're both compliant as well as compelling in their responses. But one of the first things people do when they actually go to create a compliance matrix is that they do a copy-paste from the RFP itself. They take each paragraph and copy it into an Excel spreadsheet probably or some kind of Word table, and they say, well, okay, there's a statement, there's a requirement, there's a FAR clause that we need to address. Who's going to do it? Which part of the proposal are they going to do it in? And are we compliant or are we not? So let's say somebody sees a phrase that says, you must have cost-plus accounting, and it's a small business and they don't. Or they have some cybersecurity requirements that are in there. So the first simple thing to actually help that process is to actually automate that manual process. The process is highly manual right now, but literally just copying and pasting. And if you think about it, how many hours do people spend doing very routine, non-thoughtful activities such as copy-paste, right? It's a lot. So if we can somehow very simply do the 80-20 rule, get 80% right and enough, rather than boil the ocean, just simply automate that copy-paste thing and then maybe look at certain terminology in the output. So now in a few minutes or seconds, you've got an Excel spreadsheet that actually is the basis of a compliance matrix. Then wouldn't it be interesting to actually flag certain terminology that could be risky? For instance, indemnification clauses or bond clauses, etc. So again, it's not deep stuff in one sense. It's quite simple, but actually it's very, very tedious to do manually. And as a vendor, what we try and make sure we do is actually do a job really well, but get out of your way so that you can carry on your normal process, your normal procedures. We don't want to rule your world. We don't want to kind of be a workflow system. That rarely works in my experience. Workflow is really tough because nobody likes workflow. I don't want to be telling you what to do. And what happens if I go on vacation for 3 days?
Right.
God forbid I actually do that, but if it does happen, right? So you have to have a non-brittle system. And when you're building software solutions, that's a key part of how you design systems. So how do we do it? We do things like that very simply. We look at acronyms. There's clever ways to look at acronyms. Are they defined well? Or are they defined consistently? Is there an occurrence of an acronym before the first definition or not? I mean, this is really tedious stuff, and human beings are not good at that. Readability analysis, that's a really interesting one. You can actually score writing so that you can get a score that helps you understand, if I'm getting feeds from 5 different subject matter experts, do they have the right grade level? Grade level is a very simple metric. Well understood, academically shown thing. It's in Microsoft Word, it's already there, but the problem is that it's hidden. And it's really hard to do it quickly. So there are better ways and better visualizations to give you this data to allow you to move on and get the job done. So it's not thinking on your behalf. It is raising the visibility on the risky areas of the proposal cycle, or indeed on the flip side, the contract side. Contract officers will use our to identify slowdowns and fire clauses that really are sensitive. Cybersecurity, IP matters, all kinds of stuff. And there's always fire clauses that are really important. And then there's fire clauses that, hey, we're already compliant. We don't care about that. But, export restrictions would be a classic that you'd always look at. So it's kind of various mechanisms for doing that kind of stuff, but doing it in a way that complements the workflow, but does not impose workflow on you, because workflow is human behavior stuff, and changing human behavior is not an easy thing.
Right. And I love what you said there about kind of keeping it simple. It's not hard stuff. And, what we teach here is, most of what I'm going to share with my clients is not difficult stuff, right? It's a lot of very simple steps. What makes it hard is that there's 1,000 of them. Right? There's 1,000 steps involved with the RFP process, and doing all of that stuff within the dedicated time frame with an RFP that you're still trying to even comprehend what they're asking for. And so I love that simplicity of it, that it doesn't over process and it doesn't over complicate things, but it helps because, I would guess from a time perspective, it really helps people better manage their time and get some time back, because I know, from some of my large clients, the amount of time they spend on peer review looking for those acronyms and making sure that words like healthcare are consistent, 2 words or 1 word, all of those kinds of things. So
right. And actually, to that end, we do an annual users conference, and we had a fantastic event in May or in March, of this year in Virginia. And, we had well in excess of 150 people attend that conference, but we did a quick survey and we actually asked the users, what kind of value, what kind of efficiencies are they getting from the solution? And on average, the response came back as 66.7 hours per proposal turn.
Wow.
Right now, this is pretty major. And then they were assessing what is the average P-win improvement. And they're assessing their P-win improvement as 9.8%. One is an efficiency gain, and the other is actually because you're no longer missing stuff that you might have missed, and because you're focusing on the right stuff. It's not about, we're not magically changing the game completely, but if you inject analytics into the cycle, into the color team review stage at various points, let's say even upstream into the capture phase, where you say, actually, what, we're not qualified to pursue that. I'm not going to drop a lot of effort and energy on this, but in fact, we really should be focused on this initiative or that pursuit. And that's something that you can add into the bag of tricks. You can actually analyze the language of the RFP to say, actually, what? These areas that we're completely strong on, we're not seeing it. So what the heck are we actually chasing this for? And there's a lot of subjective kind of viewpoints, particularly with smaller businesses, where, let's say the CEO or the senior leadership happens to have a relationship and they say, we must go chase this. Nobody has any defensibility on it. Now, if you run the rule against the actual RFP and you say, well, actually, okay, that's fine, we can do it. But guess what? They're not talking about, whatever branch of engineering that we specialize in at all. Maybe there's a bit of a mismatch here. And I know as a smaller vendor, that's a big part of our stuff. The key is not to bid the silly stuff.
Right.
Because you'll drop so much energy and time in it. And that's the kind of big decision. But analytics can really help that. Language can really help that.
That's really interesting that it can be part of that conversation too, because so many of my clients, particularly, maybe not the big large ones that have been around for a while and they know they've got some strong assessment criteria, but some of the more mid-sized, they don't really pay attention. They get an RFP on their desk and they're like, oh my gosh, the title looks great, let's go for it. And so it's really great that it addresses that too. So that leads me to a question about size. And when you introduced yourself, you talked about some of your very big clients, very impressive list of clients, but for the smaller, more mid-sized businesses that might be listening, I don't want them to just dismiss it. Do you work with companies of all sizes, or is it just the big guys?
We do, but you really have to look at it. And I suppose in one sense, we're look, if you're really serious about winning business and you're looking at, a small vendor or a small organization, let's say they win, we have one example of a company called BVTI, who are a small business, and they cited the example of them using the compare capability. So we have a compare capability in our solution that allows you basically to take an RFP, just stuff it in, and then if a revision comes out, the problem is that if you use Microsoft Word for that kind of thing, it will force you through a kind of a comparison of panes, and it's a visual overload affair. All you really want is you want a very simple report that shows you the difference on either side of the fence, right?
Yeah.
And anybody who's grappled with Word to do that will realize that you've got to take out your pen and paper and say, well, actually, that's a font change. I don't really care about that. I can't clearly see, the strikeouts, there's ads. It's all combined into one messy view. Instead, what I want is I want a very simple spreadsheet. I want the left, I want the right, and then I want to be able to action certain things. So if you can take a 150-page doc and do a comparison like that in a couple of seconds, and then use that report that comes out of our solution as the control point and as the control mechanism, it's almost like a compliance matrix of types. So why am I regaling you with this, and why am I boring you with all that detail?
No, it's good.
It's because that particular customer who spoke at our users conference, actually not this past March, it was the prior March, and it was a fantastic use case. They were bidding on a very, very strategically important bid. Now, it was a multi-year bid. They've been working years on actually the prep work of this and getting it teed up. And they had 6 days to do turnarounds on revisions. This is over a holiday period. It was kind of over the Christmas period.
Of course.
The usual stuff, right? I mean, okay, we're working on this months, if not years, and all of a sudden, bang, the feds come back and they say, well, we want to, we don't care about holidays, whatever. And they had 6 days to turn this thing around. And they were being asked to itemize every difference in the turn time, and they were given a revision of the actual RFP, and they were asked to actually show their revisions as well as reports. So the assessment here was going to be when they actually figured out the amount of time it would take. Now, this is it post the event. So
right.
the thing was, one of the people in there said, hey, you know what? We can do this. We've got this thread. It can do compares. We can compare not just their docs, we can compare our response, and we can actually give them back the reports that they need. And they won that contract. It was a 30 million outcome for them.
Nice.
Win, and multi-year contract. A very strategically important win. Now, did they spend money with us to buy our software? Of course.
Of course.
Was it $45 a month? Absolutely not.
Right.
But it was just basically something that so I always answer the question, how important is it for you as a small business to win? What is your strategic objective? If you're a small business, Visible Thread becomes quite strategic. If you're a larger business, it's helping the operations element of the business in both the sales and the marketing side of the fence. So our large customers, yes, it becomes, typically we start out in kind of pockets, different sites or different kind of divisions in a large company. But we'll start to spread, and then, of course, it becomes a more corporate kind of standardized approach. And that's kind of our typical cycle. And yes, of course, there's money involved in that. But, you get what you pay for. We've got a very heavy staff of engineers. We've got support staff. We've got overheads. We're a business. We're like any other business. And we've got overheads. So we need to kind of, and, we do a lot of QA and a lot of cycles, and we release new revisions of our stuff, at least once, if not twice a year. And that costs money.
So, right.
And people can go and do what we do, or attempt to do it, certainly by doing Excel macros and by doing Word macros, and that's more part of them. But I'm always heartened when I see a prospect that's talking to us and they tell me that they've written all these Excel macros. That makes me feel very happy, because I know that they realize that they can't keep spending money on non-core activities. Because writing Excel macros, fine, you can do that. But it's a bit like, do you want to build everything yourself, or would you like to kind of use best of breed stuff? And I hate to use that phrase because it's a way of trite phrase, but best of breed is actually a useful approach. And we think of ourselves in that way.
Well, yeah, and it's really interesting when you start talking about expense, because we obviously have the same thing, even though we're a service versus a product. I mean, if somebody comes to me and they're looking to bid on a $5,000 RFP, well, probably not going to hire us, right? But,
Exactly.
at some point, the amount of time and resources and all of that adds up that you don't necessarily see. So sometimes the business owners are like, well, this is an expense up front versus all of that time and frustration of losing over and over and over. Or, the other kind of non-obvious cost is the cost of your employees' frustration and demotivation and burnout and all of that. So that's really good. Is there any type of a company that this solution would not work for, aside from the investment piece of it?
Sure. So we tend to see customers fall in. So it's kind of cross-sectoral. So we have a lot of defense and aerospace customers, a lot of financial services, healthcare, the usual suspects. Those people typically playing
the big guys. Yep.
And many of the small guys, manufacturing, construction, et cetera, et cetera. Many big and many small as well. And the small ones appreciate the value and they understand the value. But as I say, it's not, there's a floor, and if they want something cheaper, fine, they can go and use something else. In terms of the applicability, if you think about language, and this is what's exciting for us as a company and what's exciting about our strategy, what we're finding is that certain aspects of what we do are actually applicable across an entire organization. So let me give you an example of that. If I'm doing an acronym pull, that's specifically relevant typically for a proposal manager, a volume lead, an editorial manager, whatever it might be, right? That's a kind of a niche capability, right? And that's okay. But if I'm looking at single tone of voice and metrics around readability, actually guess what that applies to? It applies to, yes, sure, the proposal, but it also applies to the marketing collateral. It applies to your correspondence letters.
Huge.
It applies to everything, right? If you think about we're all writing emails. We all put in attachments, and everybody, okay, Slack is there, and there's all this kind of stuff that's actually helping make communication clearer and faster. But actually, the written word is typically carried in probably three main things: Microsoft Word, sometimes Google Docs, PowerPoint, and arguably a little bit of Excel and that kind of stuff. And then there's kind of email threads and so forth. It's all written language. So actually, as you think about the various parts of an organization, let's consider HR. HR have got to do, specs for jobs. Does that need to be clear and understandable? Yeah.
Wow.
What about if I'm a financial service organization? I'm doing possibly, observations or research around the fund performance. Does that need to be clear? Absolutely. What if I'm a healthcare organization and let's say a Medicare administrative contractor, acting on behalf of the CMS in healthcare? Do I need to make sure my audit letters are clear and concise and they're compliant? Absolutely. So readability analysis is across the entire organization. So we're finding a lot of our customers start out with the solutions for kind of, acronyms and compliance matrices and so forth. And we have lighter weight solutions that actually help all of these other people or functions measure for readability. And then we layer on top of that kind of dashboards that help understand, okay, A, are people even using this? Are they self-scoring? Are they testing their content? And B, let's see what the quality is like. Is the quality improving? And actually, it's a simple thing, but grade level is a very interesting thing. It harmonizes. It kind of moves us from, assessing content quality as a subjective judgment. I think your content is great or crap or whatever right. But immediately when I say that, it's my view. So you almost by definition have to respect my opinion. If you don't respect my opinion, of which, many people don't, then I don't have a leg to stand on, right? So what I need metrics. And executives need metrics. And once you introduce metrics to the equation, you get a funny behavior change. You get this behavior. People actually start to respect the metrics, particularly subject matter experts. And if the metric is something as simple as a grade level, and if we can now track to see if it's going down, which is our objective, because you want to make it as simple as possible. It's not dumbing it down. It's making it simpler and actually all the contributors and what they're writing, because subject matter experts are not writers, but everybody is now a writer. And proposal managers are afraid to kind of edit this stuff, because if I edit somebody who's writing about cybersecurity, who knows what I'm going to do to the message? I may accidentally screw in the message. And the problem there is that, so there's a kind of a fear factor. Whereas if I now give that subject matter expert a scoring ability in a lightweight fashion so they can run this through that hopper, and I can track that, now you've got visibility across an entire organization. And that's where we're going as a company. summary, the entire communication space, and at the outset I mentioned, what's our vision or what's our driving force in Invisible Thread? It's actually to make the organization a clearer place. And that has all kinds of profound effects. It makes engagement better. It increases the engagement between federal contractors and government. It makes the brand experience better. It means that the letter that I used to get from the IRS that I'm suddenly now getting is much clearer, much easier to understand. My terms and conditions are much easier to understand.
Yeah.
What does that do for my perception of your brand? It makes it much better. I'm more likely to stick with you as a customer. So it's quite profound. There's a much larger thing at play here, not just the proposal side of the fence.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really important as a small business owner. I understand just in my small little ecosystem over here, right? The difficulty in keeping consistent with the way that I communicate about the brand and the way that we, in all the different ways, right? These days we've got so many different platforms. So that alone, and I'm even thinking applicability for some of my larger clients with their client work, right? Kind of back to all of that communication. That's pretty incredible that it can. I didn't even think about that possibility of across outside of the proposal world. Sometimes we get so tunnel vision, right?
No, for sure. And I guess it's really interesting. We've kind of, evolved into that positioning because our customers have told us, hey, you know what? We actually have a much bigger problem, a much larger problem outside of just that, proposal coordinators, proposal managers, volume leads, they have issues. But actually, when you get into it, the issue at its core is one of communication across all the players.
Nice.
And then you're kind of widening that whole remit. And that's been very interesting for us. So the last 3 years for us has been largely around actually going towards that bigger, larger direction, which is kind of jumping off the platform of kind of proposals and actually widening that whole spectrum.
Interesting. So that leads me to another question.
Sure.
When people come to you, what is their biggest problem that they've got that they're like, oh, we need solved for this?
It's a great question. There's probably a variety of drivers. It depends who's coming to us. So people in contracts have different motivations. That's primarily a risk driver. A contracts person, and we've heard this many, many times. We've had many customers who are now customers who no longer have the problem, thankfully. But their original, kind of motivator was, you know what? We went and pursued this whole thing and we didn't catch that warning signal up front. And if we had, we would never have gone down this road. And that can cause two outcomes. One is they pursue it and they win, which sounds like a good outcome, but it's actually not a good outcome because they take too much of a hit and their profitability just is gone. Right. They don't make profit on the contract. Yeah. Because in the end, they end up, let's say it's a technical requirement that they happen to miss. Suddenly they're left with, oh my God, how am I going to actually fulfill on this? I mean, the sales guys are happy because they're getting their commissions. but the issue, actually, the program delivery side is the issue. And one of the other drivers for me kind of creating this company was, I'm a startup guy back, in the old days, but, it's actually stuff going wrong. The stuff going wrong happens an awful lot, particularly in the IT side of the world, because you can't visualize what it is you're building. And then, of course, you get something you didn't quite expect it. And Agile is an attempt to kind of sort that out, but depending on who you talk to, it does or does not work. But that's a different thing. But the actual driving force on the contract side is that kind of risk driver. The driving force probably on the proposal side is a more, I'm going to use the word optimistic. Driver. It's a pessimistic driver in some ways, in the sense that the pain is the proposal managers are often getting feeds from multiple sources, and they are very tight turn times. They're in late red team review stage. They've no time to review this stuff, and all of a sudden they've got to check their acronyms again because they had fixed it on the last rev, and now all of a sudden somebody else did their kind of revisions, and they mucked up all my fixes and it's all this stuff. And then you might have vendors like myself come along and say, oh, what you need is a workflow solution. We put it all in the one repository and we'll control it and use SharePoint and all this good stuff. And trust me, that's where I say those solutions, with all due respect to them, I don't agree with that approach, simply because it is impossible to change behavior. So how do you actually fix it? You can only fix it by actually introducing whatever solution you're trying to introduce that complements current workflows. And that it's fundamentally complementary, not intrusive, not mandating workflows. So in that case, proposal managers are coming to us and they're saying, look, this is our workflow. This is what we're doing. How can you help us get single tone of voice? So single tone of voice is a big driver. Okay. Compliance matrix shreds is a huge driver. Okay. Because it's so painful.
It is.
It's just so painful. And what we're not trying to do, look, there are solutions out there that will say, okay, fine, we'll do your compliance matrix, but first you have to tell the system where the headings are. So firstly, I'll ask you to tell me where the headings. So mark up the headings, 1, 2, 3, 4, and help me understand. Now, what's happening there is that you're teaching the system how to interpret what is actually a heading, it's a second heading, and so on and so forth. We do not believe in that. And the reason we don't, and we're very unambiguous about that, because nobody, actually I won't say nobody, there are certain people who will make that effort. But if we think about it, how many people will actually do that up front? Well, maybe I'll do it on a big material, RFP. Yeah. And maybe the system won't quite do it all right. So we take a very different approach. We say, look, if you can't get some value out of our solution within about a minute or 3 minutes, we're not going to do it. So we keep getting asked about, magically generate an outline, for instance. And we're not going to magically generate an outline at the moment until we figure out a way that we can do it in 2 minutes flat. And maybe that's using AI, maybe it's using something. But we have got to do it that way. So our compliance matrix right now is 3 clicks. You upload a doc, you go to a tab, and you do a click, and you have an Excel spreadsheet that gets you going. And that's typically 30 seconds for a 100-page doc. Now, that speed comes with trade-offs. The trade-offs are that we can't automatically in a PDF, because PDFs don't have structure.
Right.
You can't automatically. Now, what are we going to do with a PDF? So then, other vendors might say, well, we'll put that PDF into a Word doc. You help the system spend about a half an hour to an hour helping the system, mark it up. And now you've lost probably 2/3, if not 3/4 of potential users because they just will not do that.
Right.
And they won't do it accurately. So our trade-off is always make it the simplest possible set of steps to get the most value from it, as opposed to make it so cost sophisticated. Because if we make things sophisticated in IT land and it's software, there's trade-offs. Now, certain users will love it. But the reason that we're expanding pretty fast is because we're actually taking that 80-20 rule of mantra to heart. So everything we do, acronym checks, same thing. Upload a doc, press a button, there's your acronym list. And we're using a lot of smart stuff in the background, but it's clever stuff that actually is generally right. Because IT is dumb stuff, right? And we use a little AI and a little bit this, that, and the other machine learning, but it generally works. And of course, the benefit of being 10 years in the business is that it generally works pretty well.
Right.
Our first version didn't generally work pretty well, but that was the first version. So that's the case. It's always a little bit of evolution.
I love that you can admit that. That's funny.
Well, any vendor that doesn't admit that on the first version is just
crazy. Yeah. I love it. So when I'm talking to my clients and we're talking about potential solutions for how to make their lives easier, one of the first questions that I get, and you kind of alluded to this, but I want to ask this anyway, because you guys probably get this question all the time. Well, technology just makes things more difficult. Like if we add in a technology, we need a dedicated person, or how do you guys answer that question really?
My first statement is, yes, it does make life more difficult. Many technology solutions, 100% absolutely do. And look, we're a tech vendor, so but I'm not exactly kind of a 20-something-year-old, not to give away my age, but you never guess. But the reality over the years, and what I've learned to my cost is that it's not to my cost. What I've learned basically is that behavior change, and I've alluded to earlier, behavior change is hard. You have to adopt tech solutions that require little or no behavior change. If we think about anything that, everybody uses an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever, flat screen thing. If the user interface and if the interaction design isn't really crystal clear and on the money, it's going to be hard to adopt that. So a very simple example. In very early versions of our solution, we had a compliance matrix capability. It was there. I mean, tech-wise, it was all there, right? But the way you got to it was that you uploaded a doc, but instead of hitting a big fat button that said compliance matrix or generate a compliance matrix, it had an export button. And then when you hit the export button, you knew that the export button was kind of hiding this compliance matrix thing. You click the export button, and then you did some jiggery pokery around the settings, and bang, you got your compliance matrix. So it's a learned behavior, right?
Right.
And you have to teach a person twice to do anything from a user interaction design perspective. You're in trouble from a design standpoint. If you show them once and they get it after that, you're okay. You've got a good design. If you show them twice, you have to revisit that. So we had to show people twice, 3 times, 4 times how to do that. So we spent a lot of time and money and effort and user interface testing on those types of flows. Now, what does that mean? It means that when people adopt our stuff, the time to value is very short on some key core flows. So for instance, if you were to look at our stuff and you were to say, let's say acronyms are a pain in the neck, and let's say that's your business here, you want to check acronyms. And there are people out there, it's a very niche thing, but there are people out there who have to do that. I guarantee you would be productive within 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Wow.
Because there's a large button that says, hey, find me my acronyms.
Yep.
But that started out as being a link or a different kind of UI thing. So I'm not saying it's all UI, but a lot of it is interaction design. A lot of it is in how you design your interface. And then the other point about software solutions, particularly in larger companies, a lot of it is, are you actually mission critical? Are you designed for that? Are you easily deployed into a skip, for instance? Are you easily deployed into a larger environment? Will IT people push back on you? Mm-hmm. So again, you learn all this stuff as you go through multiple startups and you build products. This is just a learning thing. But and I feel for startups who have fantastic ideas, and the ideas are fantastic, and maybe the design is fantastic, and maybe what the tool is doing or product is doing is fantastic. But they don't realize yet until they actually bang up against the brick wall of IT saying, you don't do X, whatever it might be, single sign-on. You don't do single sign-on. Can't help you. Or you don't support Red Hat deployments. Sorry, we can't do that. So because we had the benefit of doing, and when I say we, myself and my founding team, we came out of the history of doing startups. We had been through some successful outcomes where basically we learned this in the past. We learned how to do correct product engineering. We're not always right, but we're fast at understanding where we need to extend the products. And the product extensions, a ton of those are not in functionality. It's actually behind the scenes stuff. It's scalability, it's deployability, it's making sure that when we do drop this in, because many of our customers are doing defense and aerospace stuff, I clearly don't have a US accent, so you have no prizes for telling that I'm not a US citizen. So the idea of me touching, if I were to say, well, actually, trust me, this is fantastic stuff and you love the product, and let's say that was the case, and then I said to you, well, use our cloud infrastructure. The next thing they're going to say, well, is that FedRAMP certified? Is it you're a foreign national who's going to support this? Yada, 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 yada.
Yep.
So what's fantastic about our stuff is that it's behind the firewall, running away like Thomas the Tank. It's just running away. It's the little engine that could.
Yep.
And it keeps going. And it is in 7 of the top 10 US defense contractors.
Wow.
And it's doing its thing. You only get there by actually heavy engineering spend, which is back to the price points and back to all the stuff that makes a successful business. And that's the difference between businesses or products that are easy to deploy versus not easy to deploy. 2 things, usability and functionality. And the second thing is actually the IT, the deployment side, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it is a big barrier, I think, to a lot of technologies where people are like, look, we just don't have the bandwidth to get that up and running. That sounds crazy, right? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? But And I love that brilliant comment that you said, and I can't remember how you said it, but that's certainly going to be a social media clip that we pull out, is that you can't change behavior, so the technology has to almost kind of meet people where they are. That's brilliant. Beautiful thinking, right?
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm getting showered with compliments. That's a little embarrassing. Thank you so much.
That plus, us Americans love accents because we don't really have them. So there you go. You'll captivate everybody over here anyway.
You do. Appreciate that. All good.
All right. So do you have any, and you kind of talked about a couple, but do you have any other specific success stories that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, and it's a topical point. So we did a webinar earlier this year with our friends at Boeing. So it's on the defense side of Boeing, and that's been very interesting. They've been a customer, I'm going to say it's going back to 2013. So that's 6 years. And they are such good people and really, clever, bright people who really have a handle on what they're trying to do. But again, like most of our customers, even the big guys, most of the activity is manual. Okay, they all have Excel spreadsheets that have macros to be developed with, and sometimes Word docs with macros. So they're dab hands at tech as well. But like I said earlier, their business is not to produce Excel spreadsheets with macros. Their business is to actually win deals. That's the business. So the Boeing example, earlier this year, what they cited was that they moved. The previous state was that it would take them about 22 hours to actually create a compliance matrix.
Wow. That stuff's big.
It would be, and they would tend to be, very large pursuits. They've got that down to 4 hours. So 22 to 4 hours. It's a pretty remarkable stat, right? They're also using, and this is just kind of calling out some highlights, right? Document Compare. They used to do that with the classic Microsoft Word approach and or the Adobe Pro approach. It's basically the same thing, 2 panes a year. And the issue, by the way, just compare and Word, is that it's not designed for what contracts people need and proposals managers need. It's designed fundamentally to merge 2 documents. That's what the compare is about. Left pane, right pane, a merge pane on the bottom. That's its design. So again, it's UI design. And what's the purpose of that UI design? It's not really for what proposal managers need, is actually an itemized list of the differences from both sides. What has changed on either side? And it needs to be in a kind of a very easy to manage form, i.e. a spreadsheet.
Yep.
So they moved that down from 8 hours to 1 hour.
Wow.
So it's almost orders of magnitude difference in terms of efficiency. And the final example there was the acronym side. They used to spend 12 hours on acronym checks, and now it's down to 2.
That is a long 12 hours.
Yeah, you can imagine, right? And it's not just 12 hours, it's 12 hours with fatigue and with human characteristics kicking in, because we're all bright people, right? Nobody, and these guys are really bright, but it doesn't matter who you are. You will not want to engage after hour 2 or 3. I mean, unless you're an extremely special person, you'll not be able to keep going like that. And that's the other thing about readability, right? Readability is the same thing. People will read, and we all have this problem. We'll read a 50-page doc, but actually we're really only reading probably the first 5 or 10 pages.
For sure.
Page 10 to 20, maybe. And by the time we get to page 45, we're thinking, oh my God, when will this ever end? And you miss stuff. So when you run the rule across all this stuff and you check that content using what we call search dictionaries, which is a way of actually saying, these are particular items that I really want to flag and find, it levels out the actual attention span, and it starts to focus your attention at the top kind of cursory pass in the right areas. Nobody's saying don't read the document. We never say that. You still must read the document.
Right.
But now your probability of missing things is dramatically lower. So there's kind of a risk and a quality improvement that's a side effect of the efficiency gain. Because now you've got fresher people, better rewards, being able to focus on more quality-oriented work as opposed to copy-paste work, which nobody cares about.
Yeah, and to your point too, the piece that you can't really measure is yes, you're saving time, so that measurable time from 22 hours down to, I think you said 8 hours. But what companies are not able to measure that is hugely powerful is what happened after that 22 hours and the effectiveness or lack thereof of that effectiveness, and how that improves dramatically. So, wow, that's pretty impressive.
And we hear that a lot. So that the 22 hour, it was actually 4 hours that they cited. But hey, we'll take 8 hours, doesn't matter. But that kind of morale improvement, that ability for teams to feel more productive, you can't measure that. That's a harder one to kind of say.
Yeah.
And that the ability to spend better quality time, and hopefully lesser of your time on the drudge work and more time on the quality work, that makes a big difference. To morale, internally, to everything. So, teamwork is enhanced. And we see that, we hear it. We can't, unfortunately, put stats on it because how do I measure?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people's longevity in organizations is extended, but there's kind of an HR angle as well on all of this, which we hear and we see, but putting a number on that is really hard.
That's really hard. Yeah. And even their ability to have, and you talked about this, but their ability to have their attention span clear in the subsequent pieces of what they need to work on.
Right.
I mean, all of us have been up till 2:00 in the morning trying to put something together in a proposal, and our brains just aren't working at full speed. We're tactically getting it done, but strategically not looking at it in the same way. So I love that. And I'm all about efficiency. My company's all about efficiency. So yeah, you've got my heart on that one. I really love anything that helps people with more efficiency. So Fergal, thank you so much. How can people learn more about you or get in touch with you to see if Visible Thread is a potential solution for them?
Absolutely. Probably the easiest way to actually see what we're about and what we're up to is to go to our website. It's visiblethread.com, www.visiblethread.com. And there's a contact form on that site, so it's pretty easy to find us. Or they can just simply mail us at info@visiblethread.com.
Wonderful. Well, I'll tell you that I went to your website. I heard about you. I went to your website. I filled out the contact form, and you guys were very quick, which ironically doesn't happen a lot on websites. People fill out that contact form, and it seems to go into the sphere somewhere.
the famous hyperspace, and you begin to wonder, well, is there anything behind this particular site? But that's a whole different question.
Exactly. So,
trust me, we have a team.
Great. Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you here and to learn more about Visible Thread. So thank you very much for being our guest today.
Not at all. My pleasure. Great talking.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening once again to the RFP Success Show. I'm your host, Lisa Rehurick, and I'll see you back again here next week.
You have been listening to the RFP Success Show with RFP expert Lisa Rehurick, author of the RFP Success book. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. And thanks for spending time with us today.